Good morning and welcome to a very special edition of Impact. It is our pleasure to have Mayor Don Scott in the chair today. Good morning.
Honored to be here, Russell. Thanks so much for inviting me.
Well, thanks for playing along. We could talk about politics and policies and strategic plans, which is being unveiled tonight at council meeting, but we're not going to. We'll leave that for other shows.
Fantastic.
Don and I have known each other now for 8 years at least.
You've been a big part of my journey.
It's been a lot of fun.
It has been amazing. It's been a great time.
And we've had this conversation that I'd like us to have in private, and this is going to be a public playing that conversation, which is really the story of your life and how you ended up where you are today and why. We've had the conversation before because I've written columns about you in YMM Magazine and other places, but let's do it on the radio.
Sounds good. No, I'm looking forward to it.
First of all, we know who you are today, but people probably don't have an understanding of where you came from. Where'd you grow up?
Sure. I grew up in Fredericton, New Brunswick. So I was born in Vancouver, but my parents moved around a fair amount when I was young, and I essentially grew up in Fredericton, which is where I went to school.
And I know your dad was a basketball phenom, but is that what he did for his actual work?
He did. He actually, when he was very young, he played for a team called the House of David, which was like a traveling show team. I guess they would be comparable to the Harlem Globetrotters at this time. And eventually he turned that, he had traditional jobs, but eventually he turned his passion for basketball and his passion for the outdoors into an ongoing job opportunity. And he would travel to schools and he would put on wildlife demonstrations and he would cap the event off with a basketball game against the kids. And it was a lot of fun. I went to many of them. The kids just loved my father.
So what would a wildlife demonstration entail?
Sure. My father would spend most of his summers traveling throughout Canada at different places, and he would film bears, film animals. He's always had a strong passion for the outdoors. He's taken me on 1 million hikes. He's 82 years old, but he can still out-hike me any day of the week. And he loves nature, and he put that into my mind very young. And he just photographs and films. So during the events that he would put on at schools, it was really a demonstration of all the stuff that he had done. And he would put that into a film, and then he would play it for the kids, and he would talk to them about, the importance of environmentalism, making sure that people would look after the environment, making sure that they had an appreciation for animals, all those kind of things.
You had said that you would travel with him to some of these basketball things, and I have a memory of you talking about spinning the ball on your finger. But where would you do that? Would you do that like as a pregame show or what?
Yep, my dad would sometimes bring me, and I had the name the Spinning Wizard at one time. So my father and I did a tour of Newfoundland, and where we focused on putting on basketball games in front of large crowds. And this is when I was young, obviously. And my thing that I did that it was popular was that I would spin the ball. I could spin 2 balls at once. I could flip the ball behind my back and catch it, all those kind of things. I can still do it a bit, but not quite the way I used to.
Talk about your mom.
My mom is a homemaker. She worked for the government. She's still doing really well, still really healthy. Brought me up. Kind of always had a great appreciation for my father's eccentricity. And I think she was a little excited when I took a more traditional route of becoming a lawyer. But she loves my father's eccentricity, but always had an appreciation, always encouraged me to go to university. Neither one of my parents went to university, and I was the first in my family. So that was a big deal to my mom, and that's where she really poured her energy into making sure that I was doing my best at school, as good as I could do.
I say often that I've grown into my father. In what way, perhaps, have you grown into yours?
I still have a love of nature. At a recent council meeting, I was talking to Chief Boucher in Fort McKay, and we talked about taking a trip up to Moose Lake, and I wanted to take some of the councillors there. And at the same meeting, Chief Adams was there from Fort Chipewyan, and we talked about going fishing up in Fort Chipewyan this coming summer. So I still have a love of nature. That comes absolutely from my father. Every summer, my father still comes out west, and we try to meet and go on one hike. Usually it's in a place near Jasper that we go to. It's about a 30-kilometer hike one way, and we've done it year after year after year since I was a young person, and my dad can still do it, no problem. I'm the one who always has the challenge. He's in great shape.
Do you still manage to get some exercise in your new role as mayor?
I do. I play badminton 3 times a week. I love badminton. I picked that up when I was studying in England. You either played soccer or badminton, and badminton was my choice at that time. So I play 3 times a week. I try to. It's not always possible given the scheduling that happens right now. I recently joined a fitness class at Mac Island. So I've always believed in trying to stay as fit as possible. And you always believe you're in shape until you take one of those classes, and you quickly discover that you are not in shape at all. I was there last night working out, and it was like a pool of sweat underneath me. and everyone had a good laugh looking over at me as I was, trying to finish all the exercises that were done a little bit more with ease by everybody else who was there.
We've spoken previously of your mom and dad and their influence on your life. Is there anybody else from your early childhood that stands out as having influenced you in some way?
After I graduated from law school, I had a person that I worked for named Bill Hoyt. He was the Chief Justice of the New Brunswick Court of Appeal, and he had a big influence on my life. He went to Cambridge and encouraged me to apply to Cambridge. He talked to me a lot about the law and really encouraged me to eventually have my own practice. And he was the first person who talked to me a little bit about politics, I would say. And I'd always had a love of politics because I'd always been a fan of Winston Churchill and Abraham Lincoln. I'd read a lot of books about them. I know probably more about Churchill than a lot of people might, just because I've read so much. But that mentor, Bill Hoyt, and he's still alive and doing well, he always encouraged me and was always encouraging me to be an ambitious person. And I think that's a little bit of where that came from, trying to always help people and do a little bit more than what might be expected.
Our guest this morning is Mayor Don Scott, and we're learning a little bit more about the man behind the fellow wearing the mayoralty. What is that thing called that you have to wear?
Oh, the chains of office.
The chains of office. We're going beyond the chains of office this morning. We're going to take a break and come back and ask Don about a particular experience he had while over in England that was rather fascinating in terms of his legal career. You're listening to Impact. It's a team effort of United Way, Fuse Social, Shaw TV, Fort McMurray, and 91.1 The Bridge. Welcome back to a very special edition of Impact. Our guest this morning is His Worship Mayor Don Scott. That feels weird to say. I'm sorry.
It feels weird to hear, quite frankly. I mean, I'm honored with the title, but
yeah,
I'm still Don.
I just read a book from somebody in Obama's administration, and he had a thing where he didn't want people calling him Mr. President.
I actually correct everybody who says, Mr. Mayor or things like that when I know them personally. There's some settings where it's more appropriate, but I try to correct everybody and insist they just say Don.
I love it. You were talking about Bill Hoyt and his influence. It was Bill Hoyt.
It was.
Okay, so you went to Cambridge and went to law school, and then somehow you ended up in the Bloody Sunday inquiry process in some way. Talk about that.
Yeah, it was an amazing experience for me. When I was in New Brunswick, I was working for Bill Hoyt, and he had been appointed as one of the judges to deal with an inquiry into the events of Bloody Sunday, which is an event that happened in Northern Ireland back a long time ago. And he encouraged me to apply for a job at the same time and to apply for Cambridge at the same time. And I was really fortunate. I got the job for the Bloody Sunday inquiry, and at the same time I got into Cambridge. So, I went over, it was, I think, May, and I worked for the Bloody Sunday Inquiry for a couple of years. Even while I went to Cambridge, I was working for the Bloody Sunday Inquiry part-time. And I got to travel to Northern Ireland and basically take witness statements, talk to the people of Northern Ireland about the events that happened. It was a really tragic event that happened in the 70s, where a number of people were killed by the British government, by the British Army. And there had always been a concern about that event, and this inquiry was really motivated to try to bring some closure to what had happened at that time. I had a role that was beyond anything I could have dreamed of. They would often send me over because everybody seemed to like Canadians over there, and they would open up to Canadians. So I was often sent in if there was a difficulty with meeting with other people, and I really enjoyed that. The people of Northern Ireland are amazing. They took me right in, and I'd never had a taste of Guinness in my life before I went over to Northern Ireland, but I was well versed in Guinness by the time I'd left.
How would you describe your relationship with the law?
I always looked at the law as a way of helping people. When I was in law school, one of the questions I was asked by one of my professors is, why are you in law school? Why have you chosen this as something you want to do? And the professor went around the class and people gave various answers. It's a good career, it's safe, it's this and that. And I remember when it came to me, the answer came very naturally. I said, I'm doing this so I can help people. And I remember the professor had a bit of a smile at that time, and he talked to me about that later. He said that he thinks that that's a noble reason to be in law, and that's a good reason because it's a great opportunity to help people. I've always seen the law as that.
At some point, you finished law school, eventually ended up in Fort McMurray with Janie, and opened up a law practice. And I'm sure in those early years, it's all consuming. You work long hours.
It was. I was somewhat famous for sending faxes at 1 in the morning and 2 in the morning when I first started. So it took me a while to establish myself and to get a name and to make sure that I was marketing myself. That's come a long way. But it took a while. It was a long process. I loved Fort McMurray from day one when I arrived. I initially lived in the towers. A lot of people don't know that background, but when I first got here, I lived in the towers with my wife, Janie. We didn't have enough money for a bed. We slept on the floor, and it took a long time. Fort McMurray is such a place of opportunity, and I still say that to everybody who's thinking of coming here. This is the best place in Canada to come and to start a life.
At some point in those early years, you got involved in the community in a way that probably led to where you are today. Can you talk about that?
It is. There was a lawyer in town named Stafford Gorsalitz who was a friend of mine at the time. He was on the board of the United Way, and he was stepping away. And they were looking for a replacement, and I guess they had in mind, the board did, that they would like another lawyer to step in. And I had always, kind of been aware of the United Way, but I'd never been heavily involved in it. And Stafford Gorsalitz took me out for lunch one day and said, look, you've got to get involved in this. We think you're the ideal candidate to be a board member. And that was my first step into, I'd say, volunteerism in the community, or real volunteerism, where I was really getting active and finding out about the community. It literally led to everything that I'm doing now, including being the mayor. If I hadn't taken that first step, I wouldn't have understood the community the way that I do now, and it led to everything that I've done since.
As part of that, you were, I think, a part of the allocations committee or the allocations process. And that process, you take a deep dive into multiple organizations. Talk about the learning process of our community through that mechanism.
It was an amazing experience, and it still helps me to this day when I, face different issues that are coming before me when people are looking for money. So the allocations process is one where the United Way basically receives applications for money, and the allocations team or committee looks at the application and vets them in a pretty rigorous way. And that taught me a lot. I understood that, money is not just handed out just because somebody fills out an application. It is vetted rigorously so that every dollar that a donor gives, you make sure that that dollar is being used wisely. And it was an amazing experience because it's helped in every other aspect of my life. When, in municipal life, when we have people asking for money, I'm going to apply the same approach going forward as we did with the United Way. We want to make sure that taxpayers' money is used the same as donors' money with the United Way, that every dollar is spent wisely.
I'm going to jump forward a little bit, but because we don't have a lot of time. You were elected to council with me in 2010. Sometime after that, you ran provincially and were elected as an MLA. And eventually became associate minister at one point, and then the Minister of Advanced Education and Innovation. How does that experience at the provincial level serve you today?
It helps a lot. It helps me understand the importance of our efforts to lobby other levels of government. We can't just assume that other levels of government are going to come here and do what this region wants done. We need to make sure that we're in their ears all the time. When I was a provincial minister, every area in Alberta was coming to me all the time, no matter what the issues were, and they were trying to remind me to focus on those issues. And we're doing the same thing as a new mayor and council. We've already gone down to Edmonton and Calgary to meet with ministers and to make sure that we're having discussions. We want to make sure that Fort McMurray and the regional municipality of Wood Buffalo is on people's mind. I had a meeting with Minister Sohi, who's the federal minister of infrastructure, about a week and a half ago. And we reminded him of the importance of Fort McMurray, the importance of this region, and he was well versed in it by the time that we'd left.
Our guest this morning is Mayor Don Scott. You've been in office just over 3 months now. Any surprises?
No, there's a lot of challenges. What I've been saying to people is there's no more challenges than I expected, though. I expect challenges. I think my council colleagues all expected challenges. We knew that there'd be a lot of hard work to do. My colleagues have been working tirelessly, my council colleagues. It's always described as a part-time job, but they have been putting in a lot of hours. You know, there's a lot of events, there's a lot of meetings. We spend a lot of time trying to get caught up on where things are at because there's 7 new people on the current council and only 3 veterans. So there's a big shift that's occurred. We want to make sure that everybody has the knowledge that they need going forward. So there's been a big learning phase right at the beginning.
What 2 or 3 issues not keep you up at night, but that are causing the greatest concern or given the most attention?
We want to make sure that our relationships with our rural and Indigenous communities is where it should be. We had our first rural meeting in Fort McKay about a week ago, and that was a really important event. It was a really emotional event. The last time that had happened was 17 years ago, and there was only one person that showed up 17 years ago. When we did the meeting a week ago, there was a full house. There was standing room only. It was a really emotional event, and I think people were happy to see that the new mayor and council went there. So going forward, that's going to be important for us to make sure that we're reestablishing and establishing our relationships in the rural and Indigenous communities. Downtown revitalization. There's probably not a person in this region who hasn't talked to me about that at one time or another. The importance of making sure that our downtown is a vibrant and a place where people really gravitate towards, including our waterfront. We have such an amazing waterfront. The other thing that people talk to me a lot about is population. You know, we want more people living in the region. People are concerned about house prices and the ability for businesses to thrive going forward. We need more people living in the region, so that's another thing that's top of mind going forward.
I have to say, I drive down Franklin Avenue, and the downtown revitalization piece is incredibly complex. But I noticed where the big parking lot is. Well, it's a parking lot now. We want to develop it at some point, but that darn thing's full of cars. We have to find a place to put cars too.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of challenges going forward. It's something that I think that, and you'll see with the strategic priorities tonight that we're unveiling, that downtown revitalization is front and center. So it's something that we're going to tackle. There's no easy answers for anything in this region. We've got to deal with it. So I'm optimistic.
I'm going to go, this is somewhat political, but I'm going to go there anyway. So you had given me a little bit of a heads up that the strategic plan was coming, and I went searching for it. I found it. It took me a while to get there. But how do you get something like a strategic document like that is incredibly important? What is your approach to getting it in front of the common man?
Yeah, well, it was really developed by the people during the election, is what I would describe it. So the strategic document that we created, the strategic vision for the region, really came out of the election. So it was an act of creation by mayor and council based on everything we heard during the election. So one of the concerns I've always had in this region is we don't have a high voter turnout. We only have about 20% turnout of people that actually vote. But the people that actually really are committed and caring about this community are the ones who talk to us about the different issues that they want to see move forward. Their ideas are reflected in this document. So I'm optimistic that we've captured the essence of what we heard during the campaign, what's critical to the residents of the region going forward.
You're talking about it at the council tonight. Will there be an easy way for people to get to it tomorrow?
Yeah, it's on our agenda, and it's going to be online. There's a big communication strategy around this
Good.
After tonight, so people will be able to see it easily.
When we come back from a break, I'm going to ask Don a couple of random questions. We haven't done this in a while. I've done it with a few guests over the years. And you have not seen them. I just wrote them this morning. And we'll find out a little bit more at a very personal level about Mayor Don Scott. We're going to come back. This is Impact, a team effort of United Way, Fuse Social, Shaw TV, Fort McMurray, and 91.1 The Bridge. Good morning and welcome back to the show. Our special guest, Mayor Don Scott. Thanks for coming in, Don. And
Honored to be here. It's been a lot of fun.
me. It's been good reminiscing and talking about kind of your life journey and how it's ended up finding you in the mayor's office on the 7th floor of the municipal tower and enjoying. I see you. I don't get out half as much as I used to, but every time I'm out, there you are.
I try to get out as much as I can, and I've got a council that's trying to get out as much as they can as well. So I'm proud to see them out there.
It seems like a really good team.
It is a good team, and that's a good way to refer to them as a team.
I thought I'd end this chat with a fun set of questions, Don, and I wrote these early this morning, so forgive me if there's anything awkward. Don has not seen these questions, but I thought, if we're going to get to know Don the man, let's do this. You ready?
I am set.
Favorite movie of all time?
The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. I love that movie. I've watched it probably 50 times.
Your go-to album?
Oh, I love Guns N' Roses. It's not really an album. I guess it's online. I listen to Guns N' Roses a fair amount. Never saw them live in concert. Always had the desire.
Wow, I never would have guessed that. The one novel you would love to have with you if you were ever shipwrecked on a deserted island?
There's a couple of books that I'm reading right now. The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. I might not need that on that island, although maybe I would. I gave that to all my council colleagues at Christmas. I bought a copy for every one of my colleagues. So I was hoping that might have an impact on their lives.
Love it. A household chore that you love is?
I do a lot of the dishes. I do dishes every night, so it's something that's always been my role in the family.
Okay, for Janie's sake, a household chore you hate?
I take out the garbage every night as well. It's not always my favorite thing to do, but happy to do it.
Your not your favorite, but your best vacation destination that you've ever been to?
Yeah, I once went to Hawaii, and that was a lot of fun. I just enjoyed the ocean breezes and looking out over the water. The true vacation that I really enjoy is going hiking with my father to a place called Moat Lake, which is a 30-kilometer hike. It almost kills me every year. My father always does it with ease, but it's a lot of fun.
Your dad, who's 82. What are you currently watching on Netflix?
I just finished Breaking Bad. I watched the entire series. It took me quite a while, but I really enjoyed the characters and the way they transformed through the show.
That's a great show. It has an actor who has cerebral palsy, like Dylan.
It was fantastic, and he's a great actor. I actually started looking at his Twitter feed, the person you're describing. I forget his name off by hand.
Too. Yeah, he was on CBC quite recently. It was really good. Favorite concert of all time?
When I was young, I went to a few more concerts. I'm trying to think of somebody who I've seen recently.
When you were young? One that jumps out?
Gosh, I think I saw Diana Ross when I was really young with my father. That's one of my father's favorite concerts. That would be the one that would stand out because my dad was so in love with Diana Ross and her singing.
This is an important one. Name one thing you do to relieve stress.
I play badminton, and I go to the steam room. The people at the steam room all know me by first name because I go there so often. I could probably go there once a day.
A political figure that you admire.
Winston Churchill. I watched every movie and read every book, I think, that was written about him. He was an amazing person and went through such a challenging time and persevered.
And an amazing artist as well. Great painter.
He's
a
incredible.
Political figure that you don't admire.
Don't admire. I guess I don't admire people who do things, who say things and don't back them up with action. There's no one in particular I would identify with that, but that's just a thought that I have that I've always kind of recanted from people who are backed away from that kind of an approach.
A lot of bark, no bite.
Yep, absolutely.
This is the one and only political question. If you and your council colleagues are wildly successful, 4 years from now, how will Wood Buffalo be changed for the better?
They'll have a population that is stabilized. People will be really proud of living here, even stronger than they are right now. And we'll have a great downtown and a great riverfront.
Love it. Don, thank you very much.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Mayor Don Scott has been our guest on this special edition of Impact, a team effort of United Way, Fuse Social, Shaw TV, Fort McMurray, who are here capturing us. You can watch a rerun of this on Shaw Cable 10 a little bit later. And our friends here at 91.1 The Bridge.